Welcome back, everybody, to the MDCU. WandaVision has finally arrived, and I am so pumped to dig into everything that I gathered from episode 1 and 2. So, spoiler warning for those who haven't seen it yet, and for those who have, or just anyone who likes to know what they're getting into before they watch it, which is fine. So, let's dig in. So right off the bat, the show opens up with the iconic MCU title slide, which, being a fan of the Marvel Netflix TV shows as well as Agents of Shield, I must say it's very refreshing to see a clear sign of TV movie continuity within the MCU. And in the title slide, we see that the intro is updated with new footage from Endgame, so that's really neat. So now that we know that each time a new major MCU movie comes out, they're going to update that with whatever new footage. So that's cool. And so for the first couple minutes of the show, we just see Wanda and Vision adjusting in to their new town of Westview and trying to fit in. That seems to be a big theme, fitting into this new town. And which for Vision, that means this continued gag of him making really obvious blunders about being a robot in disguise, which are corny, but it works. It's endearing, it's cute. And another gag that we see that's set up here in this first scene is that of Vision and Wanda trying to piece together or fill in the gaps of their past, which they clearly don't remember, other than the large general things such as Wanda being from Sokovia, which Vision mentions later in the episode at the dinner table scene, right? So then we're introduced to the character of Agnes, right, who's a resident in the town of Westview and becomes this friendly neighbor type character for Wanda. And many people, including myself, that she's this second tier villain, very much Loki Thanos style, that she's being used by whoever created or is manipulating Wanda in this pocket reality. But after seeing these first two episodes, there's a lot of details that point me to believe otherwise. And the first of that is throughout these episodes, the dialogue that Agnes uses when talking to Wanda, it's very specific. Like, for example, in their first interaction or one of their first interactions, she places a strong emphasis on the word charmed, which is a not so subtle reference to Wanda's powers and the possibility that Agnes is aware that Wanda has these powers, right? And then when she brings Wanda the cooking ingredients, she says that they could be done with a snap, likely referring to the way Wanda is shown to use her powers throughout these episodes with simple hand movements like snaps, right? And then later on, when she's picking Wanda up to go visit Dottie, she calls Wanda the star of the show, as if she realizes that their entire reality bubble is centered around Wanda. And the most mysterious clue has to be when she very ominously warns Wanda that their neighbor Dottie, that she's the key to everything, right? And before I get into what this means for the kind of roles that Agnes and the other neighbors play in this makeshift reality, I just want to cover all the other miscellaneous details that we see throughout the rest of the show that paint a larger picture of what's going on and what we're going to see in the following episodes. So before we get to the dinner scene, we see Vision go off to work at some computational site where he works crunching numbers. And this is interesting because we know that Wanda, I mean, it's highly theorized that Wanda is being harvested for her powers. But this scene and the fact that Vision is working at a computation site and his coworker tells him that productivity has gone up 300% since he's been here, that suggests that perhaps Vision also is being harvested for his computer mind. So that's just something to think about. So then we get these two, the first of two very mysterious commercials starring this couple that we're very unfamiliar with, and they're advertising the Stark Enterprise toaster, which if you look at the design, it looks strikingly like a face. And in the second commercial, we see the same couple again, now advertising a Strucker brand watch, which has a Hydra symbol on it. Now these two commercials, seem to highlight Wanda's past, different aspects of Wanda's past. First, Stark, which relates to Wanda's past in the way that it was a Stark Enterprise bomb that blew up Sokovia and killed her parents. And then secondly, Strucker, who was the one, of course, who experimented on Wanda and Pietro and gave them their powers, right? And in these commercials, you see this forget your past, embrace your future logo, which possibly suggests that these commercials are some kind of manifestation of the way that Wanda seems to try to be coping with her trauma. Okay? So moving forward, we then get to the climax of the episode, which I loved. It's this dinner party scene where Wanda, she's forced to scramble together the dinner meal, and she cooks this chicken, but accidentally overcooks it, and then she tries to undo it, but then it changes into like eggs, and then she gets really overwhelmed for a second, and you see this pot of water that she's boiling. It starts to overrun. She throws a lobster out of the window, which somehow ends up on her front door. And her grip on everything that she's floating, all the ingredients that she's floating in the air, it gets really shaky. And now this scene was very well done because it foreshadows that Wanda isn't completely in control of these reality warping powers that we see that she now has. And of course, this is going to be key for the universe altering plot that everyone is speculating to be in the final act of this series. Okay, so finally, Wanda, she gets everything control, and her and the Hearts and Vision sit down and have dinner, and everything seems to be going smoothly until Mrs. Hart asks Wanda and Vision some background questions about where they're from, when they got married, why they don't have kids. And then Mr. Hart, when they don't have an answer, Mr. Hart starts to push the envelope. He's like, really, why'd you come? Why'd you come? And he gets more annoyed with each time he asks, and this confused, angry tone Mr. Hart uses sets up a double meaning where it's that he's not just asking as a friendly neighbor, but more so it sounds like a confused captive who can't possibly understand why anyone would willingly come to live in this housecape. And by doing this, Mr. Hart, he seems to break out of his character as Vision's boss and reveal himself a little bit as a captive. And because of that breaking character, he starts to choke. And as he chokes, Mrs. Hart first playfully tells him to stop. I mean, as if he has any control over the fact that he's choking. But then she repeats the phrase more alarmingly, and now facing Wanda is telling her to stop it, as if urging Wanda to stop whoever or whatever the it that is punishing the husband for breaking out of character by trying to choke him. And then Wanda looks at Vision and she tells him to save him, and Vision does this by phasing through and getting that stuck piece of food out of his throat. So this was a really tense scene, and from this, plus what we've seen with Wanda, Agnes, and some of the other characters, the way that they interact, I've come up with this theory that all of the characters we've seen so far fit into specific roles within this pocket reality that we're witnessing. So for the first category, we have the captives, which is the majority of the neighbors who are here in this world and will likely just act as background characters for Wanda to interact with. And this includes characters such as the Hearts, Herb, Vision's co-workers, and Dottie, who, because of the emphasis Agnes placed on her, she was probably the first captive of this pocket reality and is thus the role model for how everyone else should act. And then in the second category, we have a much smaller category of what I'm calling the send-ins, who are sword agents that were either sent in or go in and try to bring Wanda out of this pocket reality or gain some kind of retcon. And this group includes Monica Rambeau, aka Geraldine, as she introduces herself to Wanda. And the exchange between Wanda and Monica at the end of the magic show, where Wanda says she won't talk, and Monica, aka Geraldine, says she has a feeling Wanda would say that. That definitely shows that Monica is in this bubble on some sort of recon mission that Wanda doesn't seem to want to cooperate with, and we'll get to more of that later. And also in this group of descendants, we have the toy helicopter that we see at the beginning of the episode, which once it breaches the dome, it makes this bang sound, which is what draws Wanda outside to find it. And this is the same noise that Wanda and Vision heard the night before, pointing to there possibly being two other send-ins, likely the rebel rousers that Vision said his co-workers were referring to. So then we have the battery category, which is where I put Wanda and Agnes, and I'm calling it that because I'm guessing that the main point of this entire bubble reality is to drain the batteries, Wanda and Agnes, of their individual powers. And now I'm putting Agnes in the same category as Wanda because each time they interact, Agnes seems to be guiding Wanda in the ways to live in the society as if she's been in that position before. And even more so, she continuously hints that she knows about Wanda's powers. And then there's Vision, who, from his stage name during the magic trick being called Illusion, I'm guessing that he's just a manifestation of this reality created just for Wanda's liking rather than being a real being like the rest of the inhabitants that we see. And of course, there's Agnes's husband, who she frequently complains about, but he never shows up. And because of this, many people are suggesting that this husband may be Mephisto, the person behind this entire reality. But personally, I'm not convinced that Marvel would go with such an obvious route to introduce the main villain for this series. Okay, so that's all for my categories of the different roles that the neighbors play theory. And before we wrap all of everything that we've seen from these two episodes into one big prediction of what's going to happen, I just have to mention the last and probably the most important piece of the puzzle, which is the "for the children" phrase that Dottie and the neighbors all very creepily repeat, right? And specifically at one point, they say that it's all for the children, and the all that they're talking about at that time is supposed to be the magic show, but it's clearly a double meaning like we've seen before, showing that this whole bubble reality and everything that we're seeing is just for whoever's in control, Mephisto or whoever else, is just to get Wanda's children. So just to wrap everything up, my big theory is sometime after Endgame, Wanda was approached by a very powerful and shady being, likely someone based off of the character Mephisto from the House of M comics, and she was offered the possibility of getting to live a perfect sitcom lifestyle, just like from what she's seen as TV, with the love of her life, Vision. But in exchange, that her powers would slowly be harvested. But unbeknownst to Wanda, she isn't the first powerful character that this being approached as a power source. The first was Agnes. And this world she believes is a fairy tale setting is really a sort of dungeon that uses innocent people as side characters for the life she wants to live. And going into this deal, Wanda either agreed or maybe herself requested for her past memories to be repressed so that she wouldn't have to live with the guilt of leaving the real world behind. But because of the nature of her powers, she is still able to gain some semblance of consciousness, such as when the beekeeper, aka possible another sword agent, arrived and threatened to ruin her fairy tale life, and she warped time to go back to when he didn't exist. And while she does have this semi consciousness, she doesn't yet know that on the outside world, her powers are being used to expand this bubble, which has prompted the intervention of Sword, who at this point she views as kind of spoilers for her perfect world. Now, the real twist is going to be that not only does this shady villain want to passively harvest Wanda's powers, he's going to try and take her children, who, seeming that Vision is a robot, are going to be some kind of manifestations of Wanda's raw chaos energy. And this villain is going to either drain them for their power or use them as heralds Galactus style for whatever his plan is. So that's all, and overall, I think these two episodes were a great start to the series, and I can't wait till next week for more. So that's all for today, folks. So if you liked everything you heard, or at least some of it, go ahead and drop a like, subscribe, and tell me what your favorite parts and theories from the show were down in the comments. Peace.